She didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw insults. But when Candace Owens came at her with heat, Jasmine Crockett stood tall and turned that heat into fuel. This wasn't just a debate. It was the moment the mic dropped, the crowd shifted, and a new voice took control. And the look on Candace's face said it all. It all started with an invitation. A major political panel was being organized, broadcast live across social media, with thousands of people scheduled to watch from all over the country. The topic? Race, policy, and power in America. Controversial. Heated. And guaranteed to make headlines. On the event poster, one name stood out in bold letters: Candace Owens. Known for her fiery opinions, sharp tongue, and fearless presence, Candace was the obvious draw. She had built her brand on confrontation, unafraid to call out anyone, anywhere, anytime. Whether people loved her or hated her, one thing was certain: they were watching. But there was a second name, quieter, smaller, but no less important: Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Some in the audience weren't as familiar with her. A sitting U.S. representative, she was gaining a reputation for being fierce, focused, and deeply informed. While Candace ruled the podcast and influencer world, Jasmine ruled the legislative floor. Different lanes, but they were about to collide, and no one could predict what that crash would look like. What the organizers didn't realize was that this wasn't going to be just another political back and forth. They weren't just bringing two voices to the table. They were bringing a storm and a steady wall. And when those forces meet, only one stands. From the moment Candace and Jasmine stepped onto the stage, the air changed. You could feel it. Not just in the room, but in the comments section, where live stream viewers were already buzzing. Candace walked out confidently, wearing her signature smirk like armor. She waved, she posed, and she soaked in the applause from her loyal crowd. She had done this before, many times. This was familiar territory. Jasmine Crockett walked out next. No drama. No performance. Just calm steps. Chin up. Shoulders back. She didn't wave. She didn't smile for cameras. She took her seat and looked directly at Candace. Her energy was different. Not loud. Not aggressive. But you could tell she wasn't there to survive. She was there to speak. To challenge. To win. Candace glanced over, maybe expecting nerves or awkwardness. But Jasmine's eyes didn't flinch. And in that silence, something became clear to everyone watching. Candace came to perform. Jasmine came to handle business. The moderator began with opening statements. As expected, Candace kicked things off strong. She was sharp, witty, sarcastic. She pulled no punches, throwing out buzzwords, criticizing Democratic policies, and jabbing at Jasmine with indirect shots. And the crowd? At first, they loved it. Candace had control. She was in her zone. She leaned back in her chair, relaxed and confident, like she had already won. But Jasmine? She just listened. No eye rolls. No interruptions. She let Candace go. She let her talk. And when it was her turn, she leaned forward, held the mic gently, and spoke like a woman who knew every word counted. She didn't match the sarcasm. She didn't meet the volume. She met the moment. Every sentence was grounded. Focused. Precise. She didn't aim for applause. She aimed for clarity. And you could feel the shift. The audience, which started off cheering for Candace, began to settle. Phones came down. Eyes locked in. The energy changed again, not because Jasmine yelled louder, but because what she said actually mattered. This was no longer a stage for sound bites. It had become a platform for substance. Candace realized it too. You could see it in her body language. The smirk began to fade. The interruptions started. She tried to steer the conversation back to her talking points, tried to throw Jasmine off her rhythm. But it didn't work. Jasmine didn't take the bait. She stayed steady. Every time Candace tried to rattle her, she answered with facts. Every time she was cut off, she calmly reclaimed her space. And the audience noticed. This wasn't just a debate anymore. This was a chess match, and Jasmine was thinking 5 moves ahead. On social media, the comments started to flip. Viewers were tweeting. Wait, who is Jasmine Crockett? She's killing this. Candace brought the heat, but Jasmine brought the blueprint. This ain't going the way Candace thought it would. By the time the first segment ended, it was clear. Candace had underestimated her opponent. And Jasmine? She hadn't underestimated anything. She knew exactly what kind of game this was. And she came ready, not just to play, but to win. The discussion began with structure and respect. The moderator guided the conversation toward major national issues: education, race, criminal justice reform. At first, it felt like a typical political panel. Each speaker took turns. Points were made. Stats were cited. Opinions floated back and forth. Candace Owens and Jasmine Crockett were both composed, controlled, and playing within the lines. But if you've watched Candace long enough, you know she doesn't stay in the lines for long. It wasn't just a matter of if she'd strike, it was when. And sure enough, it didn't take long. After a short discussion about systemic inequality in education and the criminal justice system, Candace shifted in her seat. She leaned forward. You could feel the setup. And then she struck. Looking Jasmine directly in the eye, she said, with her usual sharp edge. You represent the very system that keeps Black communities in chains. You're not the solution, Congresswoman, you're part of the problem. The moment hit like a thunderclap. The entire audience froze. A few gasped. Some even laughed nervously. Phones whipped up into the air. You could hear the murmurs ripple through the crowd. And Candace? She leaned back slowly, almost like she'd just delivered the mic drop of the night. Her smile crept in again, the kind that says, yeah, I said it. She thought she'd landed the knockout blow. She thought she had put Jasmine on the defensive. She thought the crowd would cheer her dominance. But Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't lean back. She didn't look shocked. She didn't fumble or fire back emotionally. Instead, she reached slowly for her mic, brought it to her lips with a slight, confident smile, and said, calmly, clearly, and completely in control. It's interesting you say that, Candace, because while you're on podcasts selling outrage, I'm in Congress passing laws that actually help people. I don't perform for claps. I fight for change. And right there, boom. The audience exploded. Cheers. Applause. A few people even stood up. It wasn't loud just because it was fiery, it was loud because it was real. Jasmine's words weren't planned for viral clips. They came from the kind of experience you can't rehearse. They carried the weight of someone who had sat in hard rooms, written hard laws, and faced tough opposition, and kept showing up. Candace tried to reduce her to a soundbite. But Jasmine turned the moment into a truth bomb. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to match Candace's energy. Her power came from her clarity. And the reaction online? Instant. Within minutes, clips were being clipped and posted across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Hashtags like #CrockettClapback and #CandaceOwens started trending. Political influencers, celebrities, even journalists were reposting the exchange with captions like, Crockett just flipped the table without even standing up. That was the cleanest takedown I've seen in years. Candace walked into a trap and didn't even know it. Back on the stage, Candace looked rattled. She tried to recover. Tried to laugh it off. Threw in a quick one-liner. But something had shifted, and not in her favor. Her confidence, once towering, now looked shaky. And Jasmine? She leaned back in her seat, composed as ever, and waited for the next question. But from that moment on, the power dynamic was different. Candace had tried to provoke her, tried to bait her into a fight. But Jasmine didn't take the bait. She rose above it, and in doing so, took control of the entire stage. What happened next would only deepen the divide, but that one exchange. That was the pivot point. The moment when thousands of viewers suddenly realized, this wasn't Candace's show anymore. This was Jasmine Crockett's moment. And she wasn't letting go. What followed wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. There was no shouting, no finger-pointing, no insults. But for 10 straight minutes, Jasmine Crockett delivered what many online would later call a political masterclass. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it, measured, grounded, and real. She didn't waste time attacking Candace personally. She didn't play to the cheap seats. Instead, she spoke with the authority of someone who had been there, not in studios or on Instagram Lives, but in courtrooms, committee hearings, and congressional briefings. Every word hit like a drumbeat. Slow. Steady. Truthful. Unshakable. She started by calmly dismantling Candace's claim that black elected officials were the problem. Crockett explained how policymaking works, how local and federal systems interact, and how real community change doesn't come from one-liners, it comes from legislation. And she didn't just drop theory. She backed it up with her own record. She spoke about bills she's worked on to expand healthcare access in underserved areas. She mentioned reforms she pushed in criminal justice. She described the families she met who don't care about TV debates, they care about whether rent is due, whether their kids can read, whether their neighborhood is safe. Then, with a composed expression and direct tone, she turned to Candace and said, "You talk about black success, but tear down every black woman who doesn't agree with you. That's not empowerment. That's ego." Boom. The room went silent for half a second, then erupted. People weren't just clapping, they were reacting. You could hear it. You could feel it. The truth had landed, and even the people who came to cheer for Candace felt the shift. And Candace? She looked shaken. Not furious. Not outraged. Just caught off guard. She tried to bounce back, threw in a quick counter about identity politics. But her usual firepower? It wasn't working. The smirk that had been on her face earlier? Gone. Completely. Candace had walked in expecting a typical debate, a battlefield where volume and sound bites win. But Jasmine wasn't playing that game. She wasn't trying to win the crowd with shock. She was showing them something deeper, substance beats spectacle. She kept driving her points home, reminding the audience that while viral clips might earn likes, they don't write laws. That yelling on social media isn't the same as leading communities through crisis. That political performance isn't leadership. The difference between the two women was becoming clearer with every word. Candace was reactive. Jasmine was strategic. Candace swung with emotion. Jasmine struck with evidence. And outside the room? The internet was already on fire. Clips of Jasmine's calm but cutting responses were exploding across platforms. Viewers clipped the ego line, reposted it, and turned it into a moment. Some captions read, "Crockett just cooked Candace on her own stage. She brought facts to a feelings fight, and it shows. No yelling. No drama. Just straight truth." Even prominent political voices, some who usually disagreed with Jasmine, were admitting. Whether you like her or not, Crockett held her ground with class. Candace thought she was walking into a slam dunk. She walked into a dissertation. Back on stage, the shift was undeniable. Candace, once commanding the spotlight, now looked like she was fighting for control of the room. Her jabs were shorter. Her tone tighter. She wasn't steering the conversation anymore, she was reacting to it. And Jasmine? She sat with confidence, not arrogance, but clarity. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't mocking. She had simply said what needed to be said, and let the truth do the rest. This wasn't just a win for her. It was a moment, a powerful reminder that in a world full of noise, calm, informed voices can still break through. And Jasmine Crockett had just proved it, in real time, in front of a national audience, and with receipts. What made the moment even more powerful wasn't just the words. It wasn't just the confidence. It was the reaction. The shift. At the beginning of the event, the energy in the room leaned hard in Candace Owens' favor. Her supporters were loud, excited, and ready for her to do what she's known for, dominate. Every jab, every sarcastic comment, every dig aimed at the system, or at Jasmine, was met with laughter, cheers, and knowing glances. This was familiar territory for Candace. She fed off that energy. She had the crowd in the palm of her hand, or so it seemed. But as the debate progressed, something started to change, and it happened slowly, then all at once. At first, it was a shift in posture. People who had been leaning forward, smiling at Candace's jabs, started sitting back. Folding their arms. Listening harder. Then came the murmurs, low sounds of agreement not with Candace, but with Jasmine. Then the clapping. Polite at first. Controlled. But it grew. Louder. Longer. Stronger. And by the time Jasmine Crockett dropped the line, "You talk about black success, but tear down every black woman who doesn't agree with you. That's not empowerment. That's ego." The entire room responded. Not just a section of it. Not just her supporters. The room. Even people who had clapped for Candace earlier now found themselves nodding with Jasmine. Not because they had switched political parties, but because they couldn't deny what they were witnessing. Someone was speaking truth. And it was cutting through everything. The applause began to follow Jasmine's statements more than Candace's. And you could see it in real time, Candace noticed. She began speaking faster, almost interrupting herself. Trying to claw back control. But the audience wasn't with her anymore, not the way they had been. The mood had shifted. It's rare to see that kind of real-time pivot in a live audience. But it was undeniable here. Even online, the shift echoed loud and clear. Conservative pages that usually cheered for Candace had to acknowledge what happened. Some of the top conservative commentators, even those who often challenge Crockett's politics, took to social media and said, "Didn't expect to be nodding with Crockett, but she made solid points. You might not agree with her policies, but she held her own and then some." And that's when the media kicked in. News outlets picked up the story before the event even ended. Clips were already being trimmed, captioned, and uploaded by fan accounts, political channels, and independent commentators. Within an hour, headlines started appearing like, "Candace Owens gets schooled by Jasmine Crockett in surprise showdown." "Congresswoman Crockett delivers unexpected masterclass on live panel." "When clout meets competence, Crockett dominates debate stage." "Candace Owens meets her match, and the crowd knew it." And within 24 hours, Jasmine Crockett was trending. Not just on X, formerly Twitter. Not just in political circles. Everywhere. TikTok edits were going viral. YouTube reaction videos popped up overnight. People were stitching the clips with commentary, calling it one of the most satisfying political moments they'd seen in months. The contrast between clout and competence had never been clearer, and people were hungry for it. Memes emerged. Quotes were turned into graphics. And Jasmine? She didn't even need to post anything herself. The internet was doing the talking for her. Some fans labeled it a legacy moment, a scene that would be replayed and remembered not because it was flashy, but because it was real. Candace had walked into that event expecting to go viral for doing what she always does. But Jasmine Crockett went viral for doing what too few people do. Tell the truth without performing. And audiences, no matter their background, recognized that difference. The applause, the headlines, the trending tags, none of it was manufactured. It was earned. Because when a moment is real, the crowd knows. And when the truth hits the stage, even the loudest noise can't compete with it. When the cameras stopped rolling, the energy in the room was still electric. People were buzzing, talking, replaying moments, showing clips on their phones. But amidst all the noise, one thing stood out. Candace Owens was gone. No post-panel interviews. No meet and greets. No usual selfies with fans. No confident strut out of the building. She slipped out quietly, with no media swarm and no signature smirk. Whatever she had come there to do, it hadn't gone the way she planned. And everyone knew it. Candace had arrived with the intent to dominate, to create viral clips, deliver zingers, and once again be the name trending by midnight. But that plan had been derailed. Not with aggression, not with louder shouting, but with something far more dangerous to a media firebrand. Substance. On the other side of the room, Jasmine Crockett stayed. No rush. No arrogance. Just calm, quiet presence. She shook hands, not just with supporters, but with people who earlier that night had cheered for Candace. People who came expecting to dismiss her, maybe even disagree with her, but left with a new respect. They didn't just hear her. They felt her. She answered their questions. She smiled. She thanked people for listening. Some even admitted they hadn't heard her speak before, had only seen clips online, or headlines that painted her one way. But now, seeing her speak in real time, hearing her facts, her tone, her focus, they saw someone different. Someone real. Because what Jasmine did that night wasn't just about defending herself, it was about reclaiming the room. Reclaiming the narrative. This wasn't about ego. It wasn't about a takedown. It was about purpose. And that's why the moment stuck. Because in a time where viral outrage and social media noise often drown out everything else, Jasmine reminded everyone of something we rarely see in politics anymore. Poise. Principle. And power that doesn't need to scream to be heard. The truth is, this moment wasn't just about Candace versus Crockett. It wasn't just a headline or a trending hashtag. It was a mirror, held up to every viewer watching from home. It made people ask, what kind of leadership do we actually want? Do we want performance? Or do we want purpose? Do we want someone who plays to the cameras? Or someone who does the work behind the scenes, and then shows up ready? Because here's what really happened. Candace Owens tried to embarrass Jasmine Crockett. She tried to frame her as part of the broken system. She tried to poke holes in her credibility. She tried to stir the pot and walk away with a viral win. But instead, she handed Jasmine something far more powerful than an insult. She handed her a spotlight. And Jasmine didn't just survive it. She didn't stumble. She didn't retreat. She owned it. She stepped into that moment with grace. She met fire with facts. And she reminded everyone that no matter how loud the noise gets, truth still cuts through. The best part? Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't turn the moment into a victory lap. She let the facts speak. She let the moment breathe. And the internet responded. Not just because it was dramatic. But because it was different. Because it was rare. Because in a world full of political theater, someone finally showed up with a script written in integrity. Candace walked in with a brand. Jasmine walked in with a backbone. And by the time it was over, the audience, the headlines, and even Candace's fans saw the difference. This wasn't just a win. It was a warning shot to every pundit, influencer, and politician who thinks going viral is more important than doing the work. You can't fake purpose. You can't outperform truth. And you definitely can't outtalk someone who's backed by both. This moment wasn't about left or right. It was about truth versus noise. Candace came with volume. But Jasmine came with purpose. If this showdown shook you like it did us, smash that like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment. Was this Candace's biggest mistake or Jasmine's greatest moment? This is the Union Show, where real voices rise, and the fake ones fade. See you in the next round.